I don't keep track of the years as much anymore. The days seem to melt into each other, quiet mornings blending into long afternoons, and then the nights, well, the nights stretch out like empty roads. But there's one day I always notice.
One day always circle in my mind, no matter what I get.
My birthday. Not because I expect a party or gifts. Oh no, I stopped wanting those a long time ago. It's just, when you've lived as long as I have, a birthday isn't about candles or cakes. It's about being remembered. About hearing a familiar voice call and say, Happy birthday, Mama.
Dette salé want. Just a little remindé det amsti here in somebody sat.
This year though, well, this year was different. I woke up early that morning, before the sun even touched the windows. The house was still and cold, the way it always is when you sleep alone. I pulled the quilt Henry's mother made years ago up around my shoulders, breathing in the faint smell of lavender that had clung to it all these years. That quilt has been my comfort since the day Henry passed. Sometimes I press my face against it and imagine it's his shoulder I'm resting on.
I shuffled into the kitchen, my slipper scratching the worn linoleum floor.
The kettle took forever to boil, and as I poured my tea, I whispered to myself, Happy birthday, Eleanor. Sometimes you have to say it to yourself, don't you, when no one else does. I set the table neatly, the way I always did when Henry was alive. One plate, one fork, a napkin folded just so. Old habits are hard to break. I cracked 2 eggs into the pan, the yolks sizzling as the smell filled the kitchen. I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would call before breakfast was done. But the phone stayed silent. Now, I should tell you about birthdays long ago. When Henry was alive, he never let one slip by. We didn't have money for fancy dinners or big presents, but he always made the day special. One year, he carved me a little wooden bird from scrap pine. Said it reminded him of me, small, but strong enough to fly against the wind. Another year, he saved up enough to buy me a shawl, soft and blue like the summer sky. He said it brought out the color in my eyes. And every single year, without fail, he baked me a cake. It wasn't pretty, but oh, the taste of it. He always wrote my name across the top in shaky letters with frosting that dripped down the sides. I used to laugh, but I loved every bite. When Michael was a boy, he'd run through the house with little crayon cards he made himself. Happy birthday, Mommy, they said in crooked letters. He'd hug me so tight my ribs ached. I remember the year he saved his pennies and bought me a pair of earrings from the 5 and dime. They turned my ears green, but I wore them anyway. I wore them proudly because they came from him. But children grow up. They get busy. They forget the little things. Or maybe they just stop seeing their mothers as people who still need love. By noon, I was still waiting. The clock ticked so loud it seemed to mock me. I told myself maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe they'd all drive up together, bring a cake, sing me a song like old times. I tried to believe it. I even baked a pie, just in case.
Apple, Henriette's favorite.
I thought it might make the house smell welcoming. I set the pie on the counter to cool and went to the porch to sit in my rocker. The air was crisp, the leaves beginning to change. I watched the road leading up to the house, my heart leaping at every passing car. But none of them slowed. None of them turned into the driveway. Around 3 o'clock, the phone finally rang. I nearly tripped over myself running to it. My hands shook as I lifted the receiver. Hello? I said, my voice almost breaking. But it wasn't Michael. It wasn't anyone in the family. It was a telemarketer asking about a credit card offer. I hung up before the tears spilled. The hours dragged on.
The sun dipped low, shadow creeping through the house.
I lit a candle on the table, the way I always did when Henry and I used to sit down to supper. The pie sat untouched, its golden crust glistening in the flickering light. I cut myself a slice, but it tasted bitter. Not because of the apples, but because it wasn't shared. Food loses its sweetness when there's no one to share it with. By the time night fell, I had given up on waiting. I went back to my chair by the window, the same chair where I've spent so many lonely evenings. I rocked slowly, the boards creaking beneath me. My hands folded in my lap, and I whispered to Henry, Well, love, it's another year. I'm still here.
Still waiting. And then, child, the tears come.
I didn't want them to, but they did.
Hot, heavy tears rolling down my wrinkled cheek.
Not because I was angry, but because I felt invisible. Forgotten. As if I had already left this world in their minds, even though I'm still breathing. I don't need gifts. I don't need parties. All I wanted was a voice, a word, a reminder that I still mattered to the people I gave my life for. Is that too much to ask? Sometimes I wonder if Michael remembers the birthdays I stayed up sewing his costumes for school, or the cakes I baked when money was too tight for anything else. Does he remember the years I went without new shoes so he could have what he needed? Does he ever think of the woman who sat by his bedside when he was sick, who kissed his forehead, who prayed for him every night? I suppose not. Still, even after all this, I don't stop loving him. A mother's heart doesn't work that way. No matter how much neglect, no matter how deep the hurt, there's always love underneath. Love that aches, love that waits, love that forgives even when it shouldn't. So on that birthday night, after the candles burned low and the house grew quiet again, I whispered a prayer. Not for me, but for him. I prayed that one day when he's older, when his children are grown and his own house feels too empty, he'll remember. Maybe he'll sit in his own chair, thinking of me, and regret will knock on his heart. And maybe, just maybe, he'll pick up the phone, even if it's too late, and say, "Happy birthday, Mama." That's all I want. So child, if you still have your grandmother, don't let her sit by the window waiting. Don't let her blow out the candles alone. Call her. Visit her. Tell her she matters, because she does. More than you know. And if you happen to see a pie cooling on a counter one day, golden and sweet, remember there's a story behind it. A story of a woman who baked with love, waiting for someone to walk through the door.